Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I'm Michael Stewart, Robb, better known as Mike, and today we are talking about a late medieval nun. Now wait, don't shut this off, go to another video yet. This is a really good medieval nun. We're talking about Teresa of Avila and her interior castle, and this is a part of the series that I have called Life Books. So today I have Laura Hellsten with me. She is a reader friend from Finland. I met her a couple years ago and was delighted to know that she is a theologian. She has studied at Åbo Akademi University, and she still works for them. They liked her work so well that they kept her on for a postdoc, which means that she did the doc first. Of all things, she studied a lot of medieval nuns and dance. She is a dancer herself. She has been an instructor for Nia and I'm sure all different other kinds of forms. So welcome to this show, Laura Hellsten.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and thanks for agreeing to talk about Teresa of Avila. This is my copy of her interior castle.
And that's mine.
Laura, I've said that you're a dancer, and you were a dancer before you were a theologian, isn't that
That's
right?
correct. Yes, I was. It was dancing that drew me into this journey and adventure of what I call spiritual formation nowadays. But at that time, it was just like a need to do things for my mind, for my body, for my emotions, for my spirit, in order to stay healthy and well-being on all aspects of what life is.
I mean, somebody who's pretty engaged in using their body, and then you go to the university, it's more of a mind thing there. You've got both sides working, and then your project was again looking at, why don't you tell us a bit about what your main research project has been?
Yes, it started off actually with me doing what's called participatory research. So you go into the field of today, normal living people in a specific setting. And for mine, it was women in Sweden who dance in the churches of Sweden today. And then they had these schoolings of how to become better preachers, teachers, leaders, where they used dance as a method, but also to develop kind of the religious life of a church with its prayers and other things. Yeah. And then my task was to follow them and see what happens. What happens? That was the main question. However, what ended up happening was that they were like, oh, there's a theologian in the house. We need to ask her questions. And they wanted to know, have ever Christians danced? Has there been anything like a tradition of dancing in the Western church? And then I didn't know actually. So I needed to go back to the sources and start digging. And so my final book, which is, now finished and coming out also as a real book, is really a lot about the fact that there's a weird sense of people saying that no, dancing has always been condemned, or then people saying, we've always danced. And actually none of them are true. So they're both these kind of strands of thought that have been kept going and nobody's digged beyond them. And that's what I want to do, and look at it from a new angle. And then I found out that yes, there's been dancing. Popes dancing, bishops dancing, priests dancing, nuns dancing, all the people in society dancing during religious different kind of celebrations. So a whole lot of dancing going on. And today we seem to have forgot about it. And that's a lot of why I'm writing and wondering and wanting to connect back to what are these aspects of knowledge, first of all, but also, a pursuit of a good life. How do they play into things?
Is there, let's say first, what we're going to talk about here is about the interior castle and about why you should read it, how you should read it. It's perhaps not the sort of thing that you normally read, and who Teresa of Avila is, a bit about what's in it. I'll give you a hint. It's a lot about prayer. It's not a lot about dancing. But you can do both at the same time, I understand. So they are compatible.
Yes.
But before we get into the topic of prayer and the topic of this book, how do you see dancing as a spiritual practice?
Mm-hmm. It is a very spiritual practice in very many different ways. But one of them is that for me to grow as a person, I need to be in contact with all aspects of what a person is. So I have a body that has needs, I have emotional needs, I have mind needs, I have spirit needs, I might have psychological needs that go to other places than those dimensions, and I have communal needs and social needs and so forth. And dancing is a way to explore what's happening, actually not only in the body, but also in my emotions and in my thoughts and ideas. So it's a way to go beyond the words and really find the deeper textures of things. And of course, it's a wonderful place to just go to pursue, the sensation of joy, which is a very important sensation in not a feeling, a sensation actually, in a spiritual life, is to be able to tap into that joy that I think, is constantly present in the universe everywhere. But it's a skill to learn to find it in those times when it doesn't feel so.
Yeah. That reminds me of what you were telling me before we started this talk about the Latin word for dancing that will be used in literature like this, tripudium, right? You've expanded my Latin vocabulary. Now that kind of has a double meaning. Can you explain?
Yeah.
That?
So there's a lot of liturgical text, like how you do the worship together, or even poems and things where you find this word tripudium or tripudia, depending on the forms anyway. And that word is normally explained that you should sing this song with joy or with exaltation or with, this happy reverence or something like that. But actually the word also means to dance. And there's a specific even pattern with these steps, 3 steps that you take that are associated with that word. So in most Latin old texts that you find from the medieval period, it's always just translated with joy. And one of the questions that I am asking in my research is that, well, is there actually sometimes a reason to look at those translations and see if they might also include that fact people were actually expressing that joy in their bodies, either by, jumping or whirling around like King David does in the Old Testament, or just by, having their physical expression in the limbs, you know?
Yeah.
And in some cases, we then find that it's explained. They did a dance, so then we know that it is. But,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I looked it up after we talked in my Latin dictionary. I think that's up here somewhere. And sure enough, I mean, it's actually ancient Latin. Well, it's non-ecclesiastical Latin, and the first definition was sort of religious dance, religious liturgical dance. So thanks for pointing that out, and also the sort of ambiguity in sort of later texts about what actually is happening. I have a hard time imagining somebody getting to the point of sort of this celebratory joy and not doing anything with their body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teresa of Avila got to that place a number of times and actually got into a bit of trouble for it, did she not, in her life, which is an interesting part of her history. Maybe I'll just say, try to get through it quickly. You can read a little biography. Probably most books of the interior castle you buy will have a short biography of her. She's a 16th century figure born in 1515, and she grew up in a household where apparently at 7 years old, she and her brother ran away to go to the Moorish lands to try to convert the Moors. So it's that type of context, girl who would do those sorts of things. I think it was at 16 she ran away to join the convent. So some people today run away to join the circus or to go be a Hollywood actress, but this is a different time when the monasteries, the convents, were really at the center of medieval life. They were very important places in any town where they existed, and they were intellectual centers of culture. And so they were attractive to young people. And then at 20, I believe, 20 years old, she finally made her vows and entered into a convent. Convents at her time, during her time in Spain, were not terribly focused on prayer and spiritual formation and the perfection of the soul, communion with God. They had become more secular, more... So she started when she was 50, 47, more a senior nun then, started a new convent in which they were going to kind of go back to the roots of what it should be. And this is her sort of reform for the monasteries then, to focus more on prayer. And then she was going to be one of the teachers here for the younger sisters in the nuns. By that time, she had actually already published some books, if I'm not mistaken. And then this book, Interior Castle, is at the very end of her life. So when she's 60 years old, she was kind of a controversial figure, as everybody was in 16th century Spain. It was very hard to do the right thing in that nation at that time. But they say, okay, you need to go retire. And in her retirement, she writes one of the best books of Western spirituality that we have. So much to Teresa of Avila. Is there anything you'd like to think we should add to that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that there is a double side to this convent life. On the one hand, it was actually a place of freedom for women. They did not have to go into marriage and childbearing and dying early out of, complications with health and other things. So there were people who went there and actually kept on a very, they wanted to study, they wanted to write books, they wanted to do artwork, handicrafts. There's a rich, artistic and intellectual background that came out of that. But at the same time, sometimes there's also the tradition that you just sent your, extra girls, off until you can marry them to somebody, or, because you can't marry them to anybody. So that's why there had started this kind of schism in many different parts of Europe, not just in Spain, where the convent was more of a safekeeping of rich noble girls. They had their servants and their jewelry and their clothes and everything with them. And that's what she and her contemporaries were, not so happy about, that the life of monetary and political spheres and that kind of schemes and things had entered into this place that was not supposed to be focused on that. And that's why they took this new poverty vows, so that they wanted it to get back to the basics of learning, working, and praying. So, yeah.
And I think that's an interesting way to put the poverty vows. It's a vow of not focusing on all these other things, to focus on the things that they took to be very important: prayer, work, community life, So it sort of gets rid of distraction if you don't have to worry about where, because of the communal structure of their economy, they were less focused on how do I get by month to month, week to week, and that let them be focused on learning and prayer and communal life and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
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 Well, Laura, tell us why should we attempt to read a late medieval nun?
Yeah.
Or why should we attempt to read the Interior Castle? Let's be more specific.
Well, actually, I like the first question as well. Rowan Williams always says that one of the reasons to go and read historical texts is to be confronted with a totally unknown and understandable. So it's really a way to challenge ourselves to see things from a different light, from a different perspective. To find out things that, a way to look at the world that we don't encounter if we just hang out with people that think like us and look like us. So that's always one of the reasons I always say that we should read the historical texts, is to try to imagine, knowing at the same time that we will never be able to really get it. So there's a dual. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And in her case, of course, another reason is that it is like a profound teaching from a wise, well-lived woman who really, she writes that she's speaking to her sisters. However, we know already that John of the Cross and other influential men read her also, so it's not a woman's book, even though it's portrayed like that sometimes. No. Yeah, it really is a book for anybody who wants to go deeper in their relationship with divine, to learn more about the path of how a life, devoted to pursuing truth and beauty and goodness can look. So, and all the things that can come across you on such a path. She has fabulous wisdom to share about these things.
The Roman Catholic Church declared her a doctor of the church. Do you know how many? I think there's only one other woman that's one of their doctors. They have 3 doctors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's Hildegard of Bingen, it's Teresa, and then it's Siena, Katarina of Siena. So that's the 3 officially. Right. Yeah.
Which is another way of saying she really knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, because we should remember actually the fun thing with the declaration of women as theologians by the Catholic Church, it's always happened in the 20th century. So, so it really isn't about a thing of this, what we might find like a unscientific way of looking at what's a saint or not, or some kind of, those kind of things. It isn't. It's really a recognition after hundreds of years that this is profound teaching. Yeah.
I think one of the things other than prayer that she really knows about is the nature of the soul and who we are. And she does it in a different way than the scholastics of the medieval period would have done. It's far more experiential than they were. And so she benefits a lot from the scholastics in her reading. She will have read all the scholastic material, but we can all be thankful she doesn't write like a scholastic. So she gets the best of that, puts it into words that are have much more breadth and life in them.
Yeah, and that actually also brings up the question that we spoke about of why or how one should read this book, actually. Yeah. Because I would warmly suggest that you read it first time around like she and her nuns would, which means that it's actually an auditory experience. So, and in today's world, this is so easily done. You go to YouTube, you Google it, and you'll find somebody reading the text for you. And in this way, you can like have the full sensory awareness of what happens in you if you sit still and listen. Maybe you get images of what she's saying. At least that's how it works for me. She uses a lot of images, a lot of pictures and things like that. But it's also, I mean, there's Carol Harrison, for example, has written a lot about the fact that all of the ancient texts were often heard, not read. And this makes a difference. And they are created in a different way. And sometimes they might even be hard to get into if you just read them. So I would definitely first listen to her. And then, like you say, Mike, take like one of those pieces and then go deeper with that particular text. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a book which will immediately help you recognize, wow, there's a lot more to my life, to prayer, to being with God than what I'm currently experiencing and enjoying. So I don't think I've ever read this book and thought, oh yeah, I know it, I got it. So any parting words of encouragement, Laura?
I thought you put it beautifully. There is a world there to explore through her work inside you. And particularly, I think sometimes it tends to feel like we get stuck, you know, that things are the same and it's mundane and repetitive. Even if we found something some time ago that helped us to see the world in a new way, then at some other point we're going to be like, this is not that, you know, and then it's the right time to pick up this book. You're going to find new places and new things and new practices and new viewpoints. So it's such a pearl. Yeah.
Well, great. Find your copy of Teresa of Avila, find an audio version of this, and we'll stop for today. Next week, we'll be back with more. We're going to talk more about what she has to say about prayer next time, but listen in for a little bit, read a little bit. Thanks for watching this. If you like this video, if you've actually made it all the way to the end of this, then wow, please share it with other people. We are still kind of in the infancy of doing these sorts of things, so letting other people know is a great way to help us. But see you next time.